And she brought the friend over one day for some fun activities that I had never experienced before. So,
Okay.
so it was my first. And
Yeah.
I realized, wow, I really like this girl. Really like this girl.
So how did you make the transition?
Well, I asked the first one if it was okay, because they were very good friends. And she had no problem. The new girl that I was really crazy about had a big problem with it because she was afraid of how it would affect her friendship with the first girl. But I was able to convince her that the first girl was 100% okay with it. Interesting twist to this, though.
Welcome to Secrets of a Sugar Daddy. Here's your host, Marcus.
Welcome to another episode of Secrets of a Sugar Daddy, the #1 sugar dating podcast in the world, where we pull back the curtains on the good, the bad, and Alejandra, the shocking stories of sugar dating, right, Alejandra?
Yes, correct.
All right. I promised her I wouldn't bring her up too much because she's sitting in. But Lilly, we were all excited to hear about Lily's big European vacation, and she told us a little bit about it. I didn't ask her a lot of questions because I wanted to bring it up on the podcast, but she had a little family emergency and left at 4:30 a.m. this morning, so Lilly is not here. I asked her if she would do a Zoom, and she says, well, if you want a crying baby and a toddler involved in that, and I said, well, we better not. So we're going to have to get her next week possibly. So Alejandra wanted to come because this is a very, very special episode, number 100. Can you believe we've done that? Alejandra, have you listened to all 99 of them?
Yes.
You're lying.
No, I have.
Have you?
Yes.
What was your favorite?
Babe, there's like 100 of those.
Yeah.
Oh, 100.
So if you haven't heard, you had to have heard by now. But if you haven't, we're going to repeat this. We've got a contest, or actually we got a big party coming up with the crew of Secrets of a Sugar Daddy. November 25th. Alejandra's going to be there, right?
I'll be there.
Are you excited to see Pitbull, Enrique Iglesias, and Ricky Martin? Who's your favorite?
Pitbull.
Pitbull?
Enrique Iglesias too.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Ricky Martin.
You being Latina, that just rolls off your tongue is so nice.
Ricky Martin.
Yeah, so we're giving away a 3-day, 2-night vacation to Phoenix, Arizona. Well, actually, you got to get here. But once you're in Phoenix, you're going to get a ticket to the private suite, beverages, adult beverages, and food included. All you can eat, all you can drink. So control yourselves. But we will have chaperones there. We have transportation to and from. It'll also include housing at an Airbnb of mine. And you'll have your own private room. And most of them actually come with private bathrooms. And you get to hang out. We're giving away 8 sugar baby packages. And I think I have 1 sugar daddy spot left. Now, those do cost, so you'll have to get in touch with me at sosdpodcast@gmail.com or message me directly on Instagram, and we can talk about that. I'm still actually putting together those prices because the transportation cost, the suite cost, the food and beverage, we've got a lot of cost involved, so I'm trying to figure out what's fair. But the 8 packages we're giving away, there's no cost to you. You just got to find a way to get here. So if you want to go to our website, secretsofasugardaddy.com, and fill out that entry form, it's just a few questions. We like to know where you're from, maybe how you found the podcast, like who told you about it or how you discovered it, maybe a story. And then we do also need 4 photos and a video of you saying why you should be chosen. And I think in that video I ask, what is your favorite podcast episode? What is your favorite Secrets of a Sugar Daddy podcast episode? I've gotten a couple of submissions already. One of them said that she liked the episode, I think it was Amy, who was caretaker of a house where a very wealthy man had a whole bunch of sugar babies, and she was in charge of taking care of them.
Oh, that's right.
You remember that? Remember that story?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what episode that was. It was pretty crazy. Yeah. All right, for our special 100th episode, I have got one of our biggest fans in the studio today. And I am so excited to talk to him because we've done a lot of things with him, double dated with him. He's a lot of fun to be around. So welcome to the show, Podcast Fanboy.
Thank you, Marcus. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to call him PF for short, but he is the ultimate podcast fanboy. He reached out originally to Kimmy, I believe, and they had lunch, and it was a nice time. Kimmy's always very accommodating. And then I believe you asked if she didn't mind if you contacted Lilly.
Well, it was a little deeper than that, actually.
Okay.
Because I listened to every podcast. I was following Lily's experiences very closely. And as you know, she was in a pretty tight relationship with a guy and actually moved in with him, and he gave her the big ring and all that. So I was never going to say anything during that period, obviously. But from listening to the podcast back in February, I could tell that there might be trouble in paradise.
And you were correct, sir.
So having met Kimmy for lunch, I just reached out to her and said, hey, listening to the podcast, it sounds like all may not be well with Lilly and her guy. You know, tell me a little bit about it. Is there any chance that she would be interested in meeting someone new? And she said, well, maybe. And I said, well, you've met me briefly. We had a nice lunch. Do you think I might be her type? And she said, well, I don't know. Why don't you ask her? She asked Lilly if she could give me her contact information. She did, and I reached out, and we chatted that night and went out like the next night.
That was how many months ago was that?
That was like February 10th.
So now we're getting close to July.
So 4 months already.
Yeah,
4.5.
Now, you two just got back from a fabulous European vacation, and I've seen some pretty cool photos. I haven't heard much about it, though.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
19 days. We flew to Naples, then went to the Amalfi Coast, stayed for 3 nights in a hotel in Sorrento, a very nice hotel, and then moved to a villa in Positano that held 10 people and had 3 of my 4 kids and their friends or significant others come, and a young couple friend of one of my daughters. So that we had a full house, and we spent 10 days there. And then Lily and I flew to Germany, Munich, for a week after that, and did Germany, just the 2 of us. So
now, this is a lot of planning. Just taking Alejandra out on a date, it takes me hours and hours sometimes to plan, or a weekend. We're going to Vegas this weekend. You know, I had to get the rental car. I had to get the hotel. I'm trying to plan our meal out, and she wants a nice steakhouse, so I got to find reservations there. And then a show and all this stuff, these activities. How did you go about planning this?
Well, I had a little bit of an advantage. I work with a travel company.
Okay.
It's actually a travel club that I belong to. Very high end, very expensive. I mean, you pay generously for their services, but you kind of tell them what you're looking to do, and they'll put together an itinerary for you.
Nice.
And then, you know, you can comment on the itinerary, tweak it, make some changes, whatever, and get it just the way you want it. So it does involve quite a bit of work on my part, but nothing like it would be if I had to do everything from scratch. That'd almost be an impossible task for a European trip
I know.
of that long.
For all the places that you were telling me and the things that you guys did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice to have a planning company.
Well, we did. And, you know, I have this philosophy about trips where I've made the mistake of overscheduling, overplanning before, and that's not good. So I try to think it through, and you want to have some kind of an activity to do most days, so you're not just kind of floundering.
Right.
Sometimes floundering is okay. You know, you walk around and you discover new things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. But I like to have an activity and then plenty of free time.
Yeah.
So you're not pressed to get from one thing to another all the time. You can relax, but you can also see something interesting, do a nice tour, do a nice event. And everybody seemed to enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part of planning this one was the week in Positano at the villa when we had 10 people. And I didn't want to make anybody do anything they didn't want to do. So I gave them a list of things we were thinking about doing and asked them to rank in order what their favorite things was. And if they wanted to opt out, that was fine too. Now everybody opted in for just about everything, except a couple of dinners and one trip to Pompeii that my daughter and her friend had been to before. So we had a pretty full group at most of the things, but getting that organized and getting that information to the travel company was fairly intense because we had transportation everywhere, and there's a difference in cost and number of vehicles if it's 6 people versus 10. So
yeah, when you're planning for 2 versus 10, it's like herding cats.
It is.
It's a little difficult.
Right.
It's a lot difficult.
Definitely.
So let me ask you this before we get into a lot of other things I want to talk about. So you guys have been kind of going out, dating for about 4 months or so. It's nothing serious. Now, you introduced her to some family members. How did that go?
You know, I have to give Lily so much credit.
Now, she presents well.
Very well. And, you know, honestly, she was a no-brainer to ask. For one thing, she's age appropriate, which when I'm going to bring somebody around my kids, I don't want them uncomfortable because I'm with...
Yeah, you got a 23-year-old girl there. And you are how old?
I am 66.
66. And Lily is now 53.
Right.
So, yeah, she's age appropriate and you're not embarrassed. Like, I have a funny story, just real quick. We went car shopping this weekend.
I heard it.
And when we walked in, she had made an appointment with a salesperson, and she introduced herself. She goes, "Hi, I'm Alejandra." He goes, "Oh, okay, great. And this is your dad?" And I just he caught me so off guard, but I could look like her dad.
That's really funny.
And I go,
What did you respond
I
with?
said, "No, I'm her financial advisor."
Oh, that's a great answer, Marcus.
And then I asked him to kiss me.
Yeah, and then she wraps her arms around me and gives me a huge kiss. No.
Talking about Lily interacting with a strange family group, it could not have gone better. I mean, she's just a wonderful person to travel with, easy, go with the flow, interacted well with my kids. They loved her, you know. I mean, they knew that we're just dating, that it wasn't anything serious at this point. But, well, I guess it's serious. That's not the way to put it. But we're not exclusive to one another.
Right. You're just dating, having fun.
Yeah, and they had a great time. And, yeah, I actually got sick like 3 days into it. I only felt bad for 2 days. Had a bad cough the whole time.
Oh, that's
Lily will testify.
unfortunate.
I felt fine during the coughing period, but the one night I just didn't feel up to going out to dinner with the group that night. So Lily obviously volunteered to stay with me. I said, "No, don't do that. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." And she went by herself, and this was early on with the big group too. And had a great time, had a great dinner, and they all enjoyed her, and she enjoyed them. So, you know, one thing I want to say that you've probably read these articles by dating experts or relationship experts that say, you know, if you're going to travel, especially if it's an extensive trip, you got to have alone time, you know, so you can decompress, get away from each other a little bit. I don't think Lily and I were apart for more than 15 minutes that entire 19 days.
Yeah.
We were right beside each other, and it was wonderful. We didn't even bicker once. It was great. I'm actually surprised at how well it went. It was terrific.
Yeah. Right before I met Alejandra, I was dating a sugar baby for about a month, and she had told me that right before she had met me, she had ended an arrangement with a gentleman. They went down to Cancun, I believe it was. They traveled, and they got in this huge fight, and it was just an absolute disaster because they had never traveled before.
Right.
And they didn't travel well.
It's a revealing experience.
Fortunately, Alejandra and I have traveled quite a bit together, and we have such a great time. We're on the same page almost all the time on things that we want to do and places we want to go and see, and very, very easy companion to travel with, right, Alejandra? Am I speaking the truth or am I embellishing a little?
No, you're speaking truth.
Okay.
Plus, we have a lot in common, so
We do.
yes.
It's hard to believe you'd have something in common with a 26-year-old. I'm 55.
Right.
And it's just unbelievable how well we get along. I don't like comments like, "Oh, is this your dad?" You know, that does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but at this point, fuck it, right? Who cares what they think? It's what I think and what she thinks.
We've all been there. Last summer, I was in a one-year relationship with a girl I met as a sugar baby. It became much more than that. We were in Cabo, and she wanted to fill in a tattoo outline that she had. And I have a tattoo shop in Cabo that I go to. So we brought her there, and we walk in, and I remember one of the guys, it wasn't the guy doing the tattoo, but one of the people there looking and saying, "And who is this? What are you two? Is he your brother or your dad or what?" You know, so yeah, we've all been there, I think.
Yeah, sometimes people try to figure out. Matter of fact, we were at a restaurant. We were having Italian food, remember? And you said you could hear that couple talking about us. I couldn't hear them. I wasn't paying attention, but they were all trying to figure out our dynamic. And I'm like, it's pretty easy. She's all curled up next to me. It's pretty easy to figure out what's going on here.
That.
But we're in Scottsdale, and that's pretty prevalent. You're going to find that. And where we're going tomorrow in Vegas, and nobody gives a flying fuck.
Right.
Because that is very common there. So, well, Podcast Fanboy or PF, let's get into a little bit of your background. You said you were 66?
Yes.
And without really talking about too much about your financial background, a lot of people want to know, how did this guy get enough money to support a lifestyle like this? Because it's not for your average Joe. It's not for your guy making $80,000 a year. It would be a very tough lifestyle to maintain.
It really would.
How did you acquire your wealth?
I actually love that question. I try not to be prideful, but I'm very proud of my answer to that question, simply because I grew up in a small town, coal mining town, in Rocky Mountain State up north. My dad was a coal miner. My mother was a maid.
Wow.
So we were, I didn't realize it growing up, but we were pretty impoverished, actually. But
what's funny, you say you didn't realize it because that was just the way it was.
That's the way it was. And there weren't any wealthy people in our town.
So you just didn't know any better.
Didn't know any better. Had a great free childhood. One of those deals where you leave on your bike first thing in the morning and you come back at dark, or if you had to be home for dinner, you come home for dinner. But you just went wherever you want and did whatever you did during the day. And I loved it. And I didn't know any better. But what got me started is I was a very good student, always. Did well in high school. I went to ASU back in the dark ages on a full-ride Army ROTC scholarship.
Okay, so there's lots of ASUs around the country, but he's referring to Arizona State.
Correct, which planted the seed of love that I have for the Valley. And I always thought I'd end up here. I didn't until recently, but I did very well at ASU. And, to tell you a little bit about me, I was so focused and so driven. I was going to ASU, biggest party school in the country, and I was in a fraternity, but I hardly ever went to the parties.
Okay.
Friday, Saturday night, I was schlepping to the library with my backpack to study. And I ended up doing really well at ASU.
Now, why didn't you want to partake in the activities at your frat?
Because it's not that I didn't want to. I would have liked to.
Because I sure did.
Yeah. No, seriously, I would have liked to, but I was so afraid of failure, I guess. I decided that I'm going to sacrifice now and hopefully it will pay off in the long run, which ultimately it did. But that got me into a very good Ivy League school on the East Coast where I got my MBA. And then I did very well there as well and got recruited by all the major investment banks in the country and ended up taking a job in Texas. And I spent the first 17 years of my career doing mergers and acquisitions for an investment bank in New York and Texas. I did 3 years in New York, 3 years in Dallas, and the rest in Houston. And that enabled me to build quite a bit of capital. It's a good paying job, but it's also terrible working hours. I worked 100 hours a week for, 10 years.
All right. So in that position, you're still working for somebody. Did they pay you big bonuses on things that you did? Is that how?
Yes. The salary is probably 10 to 20% of what you make in a year.
Okay.
Now,
so
if you don't have a good year, you're not going to do that well. But if you have a good year, you get bonus pretty generously.
yeah. So they reward you for your hard work.
Correct. I like that. That's the theory anyway.
Yeah.
But it was one of those jobs that you were always at the beck and call of your clients because it's very competitive. And if I could never take a vacation without getting called back, I couldn't take a 3-day weekend because in that part of the business, if somebody's going to make a hostile acquisition offer for one of your clients, they're going to do it on Friday just as the markets close, right?
Right, yeah.
So then
that is a strategy.
Your weekend is gone and you have to snap to it and get on the defense. But they asked me to move back to New York in 1999 to do basically the same job I was doing out of Houston, and it would have involved more traveling. And I like New York, but I had 4 kids by this time, and I did not want to bring them to the Northeast and then never see them because I was traveling all the time. So I quit, and I had to decide what to do with the rest of my life. I knew I could never work for anybody again. I'd have been a terrible employee because I had so much independence in the job I was doing in Houston. So we moved back to my home state, and I started business. And I started a couple more businesses, and I ended up with a fairly significant retail business with stores in 6 states, 22 locations. Started a bank, the first new banking charter in that state in over 30 years. Did a real estate development company. I would build commercial buildings that I would move my operating companies, the retail stores into, but it was a separate company.
Yeah.
And then I did a couple of restaurants, which that has not been my finest moment. But
I was in the restaurant business and owned my own for a while. Yeah. You hear people becoming very wealthy through their restaurants. Not me.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. In fact,
it
mine
was-
has eroded wealth significantly. But,
Yeah.
you got to try things. I think I've had more business failures than successes, but fortunately the successes were so large that it's enabled me a pretty good lifestyle at this point.
Awesome. That's great. And you were married, obviously, because you had, well, I'm assuming you were married. You had 4 kids.
I've actually been married 3 times.
3 times.
I'm the classic definition of a hopeless romantic, right? And I always thought that the way to be was in exclusive relationship. So I was married to the mother of my children for 22 years.
All 4?
All 4.
Okay.
Miserable the entire time. I knew 2 weeks before the wedding that I was making the biggest mistake of my life.
Oh, wow.
But I wanted to be a father so badly that I went through with it. And obviously I'm glad I did because I've got 4 wonderful kids. But it was misery for 22 years and finally got out of that.
Alejandra's just shaking her head. She's never been married. She's 26 and she's wondering, what the fuck?
I still want to get married.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the day my first divorce was final, I met a woman. She was a budding country singer from Nashville that happened to be in my hometown for that summer with her husband. And she told me a tale of woe about how abused she was and how she wanted to get away. Anyway, long story short, this story for another time. I ended up rescuing her, bringing her back to my home state, then started dating her and got married to her. But that only lasted 14 months because as soon as we were married, she became insanely jealous of everything, including my teenage daughters who were living with me at the time because I was raising them.
Really?
Yeah, and when it came down to her basically wanting me to make a choice between them and her, I said, sayonara. That's not going to happen. So that one lasted 14 months. Then I had a COVID romance, a woman I met through a matchmaker, because I was using matchmakers pretty extensively at great expense.
Yeah, what does a matchmaker cost? I have no idea.
Well, it depends. They're all over the board. The first one I used was 6 figures.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was a national search, though. I met some good women, but nothing that clicked that I would want to marry, and vice versa. It has to be mutual, obviously.
Yeah.
And the matchmaker I was using when I met my third wife, it was pretty inexpensive. It was like $15,000. So
Okay.
met her, fell for her right away. Phoenix was shutting down, so we went back to I have a cabin outside of my hometown, and COVID really wasn't a thing up there during the first year. And she spent the whole summer with me. She had a young boy. He was up there, had a great time in the mountains. And we ended up getting married in December of 2020 and divorced in May. So that was a 5-month wedding. So it's getting progressively shorter. Sure. And that is something on my resume that I'm not proud of. I don't like being a 3-time divorcee, But again, it harkens back to me being a hopeless romantic and thinking that I had to be in an exclusive relationship all the time, which I've done a complete 180 on that now. I realize that was foolish and there are more things. But the last point I want to make about the third wife, we remain really close friends. I just realized she's a very spiritual person, and she was on a spiritual journey that didn't leave much room for fun.
Okay.
And I'm all about having fun at this stage in my life. We both mutually agreed that there really wasn't a path forward for us because our goals were so diverse. Mm-hmm. So you might ask, why did you get married in the first place? Well, we didn't wait long enough to figure all this out.
Right.
That was the issue.
Rushed into it a little
We
quick.
rushed into it way too fast. Lesson learned, Even in your 60s, you can still learn lessons.
Now, when you say you rushed into it, how long did you know her before you got married?
Let's see. We met in May of 2020, got engaged in October of 2020, married in December of 2020, and then divorced by May of 2021.
Oh, wow. That was quick.
Yeah.
Well, Alejandra and I have been going out for coming up on a year. I'm still learning things about her.
And I'm still learning things about you.
Oh, yes, she is.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it takes time. Yeah.
No, it does. It does.
Which leads me into, then how did you find sugar dating?
I actually had my first experience with it in 2019 before I met my third wife. And had some interesting experiences. I mean, the first 3 people that I chatted with that I set up dates with, nice restaurants, got stood up 3 times in a row. They didn't show.
Yeah.
I finally learned my lesson about confirming and confirming again and confirming on the way to the restaurant.
You know, you'd think they wouldn't be that flaky because there is this financial incentive for them to participate.
Yes.
But yeah, you still get flaky people. I've been stood up many, many times, and I literally have $500, $600, $800 in my pocket.
Right.
That I'm allocating towards the night, you know, if it goes well and if I want to see them again or whatever. And then they flake.
Exactly. And I know it's been a common topic of discussion on the podcast about pay for initial meet and greets and whatnot. Yeah. I always do, and pretty generously, but that's just my philosophy. It's not for everybody, but I've really bought into what I've heard about the women have to get ready. It's expensive. It takes time. They have transportation needs. I want to make sure that dating me is no burden whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah,
we really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's very admirable. Alejandra always appreciates when a guy helps her out. I didn't actually, for some reason.
We just found that out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't know. It just one thing led to another. We kissed in the parking lot, and I knew I was going to see her again, but yeah, I didn't.
Oh, you just knew?
Yeah, I just knew. But no, I am more on the side of definitely if I want to see them again, kind of starting a small gesture at least at that point.
Yeah. Well, like with Kimmy too, when I met her, I'd been listening to her on the podcast and following her on social media. I reached out on Instagram, and I know she gets bombarded.
Yeah.
I wanted to stand out because I was just curious. I didn't expect to actually have anything going with Kimmy at all, but I was so intrigued. I wanted to meet this person. Yeah. So I made the offer right in the
she told
Instagram
me.
message. Would you go have lunch with me for this? And it was pretty hard for her to say no.
Yeah, so. You know, it was a very generous amount. It's Alejandra's weekly allowance is what that was for one lunch date with Kimmy. And Kimmy said it went well. You were very pleasant. She enjoyed the time. And what did you think of Kimmy at her first meeting?
She was much different in person, I thought, than she comes across on the podcast. Much less crazy.
She beefs it up a little bit behind the mic.
Yes, but really, really a nice person. Much nicer than I expected.
Yeah.
When you're as beautiful as Kimmy is and have the attention that she has and the success she has in social media, you forget that they could be a good person.
Right. She is so genuine. Right, Alejandra? She is absolutely one of the most genuine, sweetest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Caring and
very authentic.
She's very authentic. I mean, you got billionaires beating down her door, trying to win her love. And it's got to be tough for a woman like that because you got all these people coming at you. And where do you go?
Right.
And you don't know how sincere anybody is. I mean, they're stricken by your beauty and your presence, but do they really want to get to know that person?
Right.
Exactly.
You know, and it is tough being that beautiful, I think. Right, Alejandra?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you get bombarded pretty good, too.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
Well, she's back on Seeking, and she has no problem getting men to ask for a date.
So let's go back to...
She said,
I don't know.
not
Kind
swing in my direction. All right. You met 3 or so in like 2019, and it just didn't go anywhere?
That's right. And then I met a woman who was, let's just say, the classic Scottsdale princess, okay?
The what?
Classic Scottsdale.
Oh, classic Scottsdale princess.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
What is that? Like
high maintenance, very beautiful, very well put together, but obviously most of it was created.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was going to say.
And I have zero problem with that.
Yeah.
More power to them. And I was smitten. I mean, I was actually a little starstruck. And we met for coffee at a Starbucks. And I was really kind of starry-eyed at the time, and I asked her out. We went out, we did a couple of things, and we struck up an arrangement. She was going through a divorce, too, and she needed money for that, so I basically funded her divorce, at least the early stages of it. And then she suggested that we go on a vacation somewhere together, and I thought, great, sounds good to me. So I booked a week in Turks and Caicos.
Wow.
For us. Like the week before we were going to go, she calls me up and says, hey, I met this really cute girl. We're starting to become friends. Would you mind if she came with us? And being the pleaser that I am, I said, yeah, no problem. So
oh my goodness.
I paid for another flight, got another room. We went, and Turks and Caicos is fantastic. It's beautiful. It's serene. The water is fantastic, but it's not a party place. It's very quiet. It's great for couples, families, but not for people that want to party. And we get there, and we had 3 really good days. Well, I thought they were good, but all she did the whole time was complain about how boring it was.
No.
And she wanted to go back to Miami and party there. Well, again, being the pleaser that I am, I
headed back to Miami.
Yeah, I lost a very expensive booking in Turks and Caicos. I didn't get anything back for that. And then rebooked at the W in Miami Beach.
Wow.
And 2 rooms again. And I never saw her the whole time we were in Miami. It turns out I took her to Cabo before that too. So this was our second trip. But the whole time she is pining over some doctor in Scottsdale. And she's seeing me, but her heart is really with him. And so she's on the phone with him the whole time.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, we didn't even share a bedroom that entire trip because she's like all gaga over this guy. I got back. I just washed my hands of it. I said, I'm not doing that. You can push me pretty far, but I will only be used and abused so much. I do have my limit.
Right.
And I didn't want to see her again ever. She reached out not too long after that, and we've since become kind of friends. But recently she's made a really hard pitch to me to be my girlfriend. And I said, no. Basically, I told her if I had to spend 5 minutes with you, my head would explode.
Okay.
And I told her exactly why.
Yeah.
And I just said, and she said, I didn't realize I was such a horrible person. I said, no, that doesn't make you a horrible person. What I'm saying is we're just completely incompatible. It doesn't make me horrible. It doesn't make you horrible.
Right.
But we can't be together, period, end of story. So.
Okay. When was that?
Well, she was sending me these overtures while I was in Europe.
No, when did you take her to Miami?
That was in 2019.
19, okay.
Yeah.
Then you left the scene for a little while?
Yes, because I was with my third wife, got married.
And then you got back on?
I did.
Yeah. And how's it been going since?
Well, I actually haven't been on the site for several months now, but it went very well. I had a lot of interesting experiences, met some pretty cool people. Well, I did meet early 2021. I met the girl that I ended up being in a year-long relationship with.
Okay.
And broke up that right before I reached out to Lilly. And that was a girl that I didn't meet on Seeking either. She was on Seeking, but I never saw her profile. I was actually seeing somebody else that I met on Seeking, and she was her friend. And she brought the friend over one day for some fun activities that I had never experienced before.
Okay.
So it was my first. And
yeah.
I realized, wow, I really like this girl. Really like this girl.
So how did you make the transition?
Well, I asked the first one if it was okay, because they were very good friends. And she had no problem. The new girl that I was really crazy about had a big problem with it because she was afraid of how it would affect her friendship with the first girl. But I was able to convince her that the first girl was 100% okay with it. Interesting twist to this, though. Right after I got together with the second one, the first one revealed that she was married.
Oh. And you didn't know that?
Nobody knew. Well, I think the second girl did. So she was doing this sugar dating on the side without knowledge of her husband, and she got caught red-handed. So she had gotten sick, and I just sent a very safe text one night just saying, hey, how you doing? Are you feeling better? And all I got back was, fuck off.
Oh, no.
Wow.
I think her husband had her phone at that point. And so I actually chatted with, I think it was him for a while, but he was pretending to be her. And just, I told him I was a little taken aback by that. I'd been really good to you, And then he or she said, well, my husband found out and blah, blah, blah. And so I gave her a little bit of life advice, and that was it, you know, so.
Well, very good. So how did you find the podcast to become podcast fanboy?
I'm glad you asked. This would have been in early 2022, I guess.
Okay. Well, we'd been doing it probably about 6 months at that point.
Right. I actually started seeing a person that you had seen.
Oh, really?
Yes. And she was on the podcast.
Oh.
I think using the name Eve.
Yeah, you know what? I do remember her episode. We talked about the mental health.
Mental health, exactly.
Dating.
Yeah. She's the one that told me about it. So I went immediately and listened to that episode and loved it. And now I will say that episode was one of the least interesting of the whole bunch, but it was enough to hook me. So I went back. I've listened to every one.
Yeah, it was one of those that was definitely an important topic, but, you know, people want to hear the crazy sugar dating stories.
Right.
But there is a mental toll that sugar dating takes.
There is.
There's a toll that any kind of dating takes. Yeah, Eve, definitely.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you know what's funny? I saw her on Bumble just a couple days ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. She looked good. She takes great photos. Like
she is the most photogenic person I have ever. I mean, she's attractive in person too, but her photos are a step above.
Yeah. Her photos are fantastic. Yeah. I just had a meet and greet with her one time, and then I did invite her to the
Dua Lipa.
Yeah, the Dua Lipa party, but she'd already had seats in a different section, so she didn't come up and party with us. I think she would have enjoyed it. I tried to talk her into it, but she's like, "Oh, but we got such great seats."
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, you have no idea what you're missing."
I remember that whole story from the other side. You know, I was hearing her version of it.
Yeah,
so
we had such a great time. You heard about the podcast, you listened to her episode, and then you're like, did you start from the beginning, like episode 1?
Yes.
And then just started listening?
Yeah, really swamped myself with it for a while.
It's interesting how it's evolved. In the beginning,
it is.
What were your thoughts from listening in the beginning to where it is now?
Well, first of all, it's become much more polished now. It was good at the beginning, but you could just feel the evolution when you listen. The interesting thing is, I've learned some lessons in the early episodes that I still hear in the later episodes.
Right.
And things about men in particular that are really troubling to me. I've used that as a guide of what not to be in relationships especially. And I work really hard not to be a controlling, demanding, entitled guy that, you know, treats women as chattel.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. And I think hearing the negative side of it and hearing what women are going through was good for me because it provided a roadmap of what not to do and I think put me on the right path.
Well, good. Well, we're glad you stuck around. So tell us about, you're kind of on this mission, I think, to smoke out some of these scammers that we all get. They're everywhere.
Yes.
And it's easy for me to spot one. Matter of fact, on our way here, I've got something for sale on Facebook Marketplace. I had some couches I pulled out of one of my Airbnbs. And I've got people trying to scam me, like, hey, what's your Zelle? And I'll give them my phone number. And then they send me this whole thing, like, where you need to go to this link and reset this and enter your password. And I showed Alejandra, and I said, these scammers, they just don't stop.
No, they don't. And I was subject to a pretty bad scam last year. And I didn't handle it right in retrospect, but at the time, I was kind of worried about it.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, I was active on the site, and I got an unsolicited message from a young girl. Her profile said she was 19. Chatted with her a little bit. I was not attracted to her, and I wasn't seeking out a 19-year-old. I mean, I'll date very young, but that was a bit much for me. But I want to be polite. You know, I don't want to just blow somebody off, although it's become easier for me to do that now. But she suggested right away getting off the site and texting, and that should have been a red flag. We started texting, and one night she sends me a nude, okay? And unsolicited. I was just having polite conversation with her, and that should have been another red flag. But I'm thinking, oh, she's young, she's stupid, you know. And I made my big mistake then. Instead of just ignoring that, I think I sent back like a thumbs up emoji or something like that. And then she said a few things, and then I don't know if it was the next day or the day after, I get a phone call from a guy. He leaves a message. I listen to the message, and my heart just sinks. He identifies himself as her father, and that she is underage, okay, and that he wants to talk to me. Oh. So I did. I called him and explained, hey, look, she's on this site. She said she's 19. We didn't do anything. I didn't ask for anything. She sent it of her own volition. And he said, oh, I understand that. And you sound like an okay guy, but my wife is distraught about this. And our daughter has these mental issues, and we're going to have to get her into counseling. We can afford that. Oh. And he said, I don't want to take this to the authorities, but my wife really does. And I think the only way I can keep her from doing that is if you help us with these counseling expenses. And I'm thinking, I'm starting to think, well, I'm not worried about any legal liability because I didn't do anything. But back in the day, I'd been scammed before by people that can find everything about your family on the internet. And I don't want my kids to know, that I'm sugar dating, even though I'm not ashamed of it, but it's not something that I think the child needs to necessarily know. They probably have their suspicions anyway. They're not stupid. But so I could just see that being revealed. This was the big mistake I made. I paid them, okay?
How much did you pay them?
I paid them like $2,000.
Okay.
Okay, because they said that was half of what the cost of the
counseling.
The counseling was.
Okay.
But I made them sign an agreement that I had lawyered up that was a non-disclosure agreement, and it's only as good as the paper it's written on, and they signed it readily and gave it to me. And then they started sending me other messages. Well, we need this now. Oh, and then I started getting messages from people claiming to be law enforcement, and one of them said one day, "You're blank, 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 right? There will be a warrant for your arrest tomorrow." Okay. Well, I was in Europe at the time. This was last year. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go through passport control. When I get back to the U.S., I'm going to get arrested. But I still had my doubts that they were real. But, the message from the so-called federal officer was a little frightening. But I got through passport control, and then I realized, no, this is all bullshit. And they kept sending messages. I just blocked them. They must have done 7 or 8 different Google Voice numbers because they kept messaging me, and I just block. I got more messages from law enforcement, okay? Blocked those. Nothing else happened until I finally got one last request from the wife, the mother this time, and she sent it to me via email, asking for more money and this and that. And I finally sent back a very strong email saying, I cited both the federal and the Arizona code about the penalties for impersonating law officer and blackmail and extortion. And they're very explicit. And I said, I've saved all these messages you guys have been sending me over the last couple of months. If I hear from you one more time, I am going to the authorities with this. And I was serious about it. Mm-hmm. You won't like the result. And I never heard from him again.
There you go.
So,
okay.
But I was stupid along the way. I should have never done it. But I thought it's easier to pay a couple $1,000s than to worry about this thing going on. But I didn't realize that the follow-up was going to be so intense.
Yeah. I lost $200 online to a scam once, and then this wasn't sugar dating related. It was something else. And then for months and months and months, they're still trying to get more money out of me. I realized it was a scam like about 30 minutes into it, and I was sick to my stomach, but it was gone. The money was gone. But yeah, once they have a live one on the hook, they'll try to milk it for all they can.
And I think in episode 98, you had an example of a gentleman that was being extorted.
Yeah. He
didn't pay, and it just went away.
Right.
Different. It was different circumstances.
But it was a very similar type scam. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So you've taken it on yourself to smoke out some of these scammers now?
I have, and I've really enjoyed that. That's really the only reason I go on the site now is to fish for scammers. And I've gotten pretty good at detecting them. But I have a piece of software on my phone now that is facial recognition software.
Okay.
And it's not Google Image. I think Google Images only can identify a particular image exactly as it is. This facial recognition software can take any picture of a person and find that person on the internet.
We're going to have to talk.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm trying to find a couple people.
Mm-hmm.
And
are you, Marcus?
Well, yeah.
Well, if you have pictures of them, we can do it right now.
This one girl that got me on Seeking for like $800. Mm-hmm. She's still on there. I don't think she's a scam, but I cannot figure out
what the scam is.
Yeah.
Who is she?
I'll tell you about later. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's actually kind of fun, and it's interesting too because when you get multiple hits of this obscure photo that you run through the software, it's usually a porn star or an OnlyFans model or some beautiful European person that's in the media a lot. I had that happen with a local lady that claimed she was a fashion designer opening up a location in Phoenix, and she was out of LA. And she was sending me pictures of this woman that was actually a Turkish jewelry designer, gorgeous woman, class above all class. And this woman was trying to convince me she was that person, but not that exact person. Obviously, she had her own, persona in the U.S. But her fatal flaw, before I even ran the software on her, was that she was sending me all this stuff about her taste. And she claimed to have these bottles of wine in her collection. Then I looked them up. They're like $30,000 a bottle. And she showed me pictures of a yacht. So I knew it was kind of BS. So I ran the facial recognition software, found the woman in Turkey. But then the scammer did a video call with me. And she did a deep fake, which was incredibly interesting to me, where I see the Turkish person in the video, her mouth moving as this scammer is talking to me. Now, it doesn't look like the words are matching up with the lips just right, but it was pretty convincing. But I already knew it wasn't her. So I did research on deep fakes and found out if you know how to do it, it's not that hard. So it was an interesting case. But once I knew it was a scammer, then
because usually when I ask them to video chat, they won't do it. Mm-hmm. But this one was
she actually did it. And she actually suggested the video chat, okay? And then I knew the name of the Turkish jewelry designer, and I said, oh, by the way, do you know blah, 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 blah? And she said, oh, yeah, well, that's like a persona we use for marketing purposes in this part of the world. Yeah, well, nice try, but I know that's not you, so. And then never heard from her again. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Where do you guys go on to video chat these people? Because it's not Google Voice. Can you do that?
This was WhatsApp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've done it through WhatsApp. Google has a video chatting service because I have some programmers in Armenia.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm about to launch this tech company. And when we do meetings, we do it through a Google, I think it's called Google Meet.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's different ways. You can chat with somebody through Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Messenger. There's lots of ways to video chat.
Yeah, the original was Skype. Everybody Skyped. But now every app, social media app has that.
So if somebody doesn't want to use an iPhone or do,
But what if you don't
FaceTime.
want them to know your phone name before meeting up?
I would suggest doing it through like Snapchat or something or Instagram. I don't know. There's lots of ways. A lot of these dating apps actually have it built in now.
Right.
Have you ever tried to use Seeking's video chat?
No.
Lilly and I played with it a little bit. We were having a hard time connecting. And I don't know if this was months, I think it was last year. So I don't know if they've improved it, but I noticed that even like Tinder and those others, they have video chatting services now. So I think that's actually the best way to kind of make sure somebody's real, unless, like you said, they're doing deep fakes.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on you got a list of things here to talk about. Did we go over everything?
No, not even close, but that's all right.
No, we got some time. What else you got on the list?
Well, I do know one thing. In episode 98, you had commented about Lilly, and one of the guys she's seeing is like insanely jealous and doesn't like what she's doing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
this and that.
I actually have notes on that. I was going to bring this up.
I just want your listeners to know that that's not me.
Yeah. How is that not you?
It's not me because I don't get jealous and I'm not controlling.
But you're a hopeless romantic.
Yes, I am. However, I've changed in that regard. I was the hopeless romantic up to my third divorce, and then a light bulb went off, and I'm not that anymore. I mean, sure, that's still appealing, but my lifestyle right now. But ask Lilly, and she'll tell you that I'm the least jealous person.
Yeah, because I press her, like, we'll be working together or writing together. I'm like, so it's okay with this? She goes, yeah, he likes to hear all about it. I'm like, and he doesn't get jealous? No, he's not jealous at all.
Okay, I have a question. What did you listen to, or what changed because you need to change your perspective or your mindset on how to not be jealous. What was that one? Like, what was triggering you before that you just like, okay, I'm not going to.
Yeah. Well, I was never overly jealous anyway, but I guess I'm a pretty rational thinker, and I try not to be hypocritical. And I just thought, look, I don't want to date just one person. And if I'm going to take that position, it would be the epitome of hypocrisy if I got upset that somebody else was dating around as well.
But we hear many cases of exactly that.
We do. But and Lilly is kind of a special case too because of her tie to the podcast. Okay, she's so entertaining, and her stories are such a vital part of the entertainment value of the show that I am not about to step on that in any little way. I want her to keep going, meeting people, the meets and greets, having
because
dates.
she has some stories.
Oh my God, I'm wide-eyed every time I talk to her about it.
Yeah, I do too. Like, she went on a meet and greet the other day, and it didn't really go well. But I want to hear all about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I will say this: if I was in a spot in my life where I wanted to be tied down and be exclusive, I would woo Lilly very hard. She would be perfect for somebody that I'd want to go forward in my life with, but I'm not there.
Right.
I'm not close to there. So
yeah, and she's still trying to feel things out because she's been also married 3 times.
Yeah.
And she's a bit jaded, but again, she's a hopeless romantic also, and
Right.
she's out there. She still thinks that her person in her white knight and shining armor is going to show up one day, and
yeah, no,
but I think I about got her convinced that's not going to happen. I think she might be expecting a little too much.
keep working on her.
Yeah,
on that.
keep working on her on that. Yeah. Well, interesting. Any other crazy sugar dating stories you got on there?
Oh,
You've gone out with a few people. You know how it goes.
I think in terms of stories, those are probably the highlights. I mean, I've been across the board. I've had some women that were very aggressive and wanted to be intimate right off the bat because I think they thought that was what they were supposed to do. And I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't go into a situation not wanting to be intimate. I love that aspect of it. But I also treat this a little differently than a lot of guys do. I guarantee you, Marcus, I have the highest depot of any guest you've ever had on this show.
Yeah. If you guys don't remember what the depot stands for, it's DEPO. That's dollars expended per orgasm.
Right. And I've had a lot of relationships where I've paid thousands over a series of many dates.
Yeah.
But I will not be intimate with somebody until they are suggesting that they really are ready for it.
Yeah.
So in a way, I kind of treat it as like regular dating, respectful regular dating. But the sugar element of it is my entree into that situation. And so I don't go into any not wanting to be intimate. I would like to in every situation, but if it doesn't seem like it's something that she wants to do, I will not push the issue at all.
Well, this being our 100th episode, and I know you didn't want to intrude on our special episode, I couldn't think of a better guest. I was very excited when Lilly said, hey, Podcast Fanboy wants to come on. How about this Thursday? And I'm like, perfect. What better than having a biggest fan to interview and then having Alejandra here, who's also the biggest fan.
Well,
And
It's a very special day today.
Thank you. That is very high praise, Marcus.
Yeah.
As podcast fanboy, I can't think of anything nicer than anybody could say to me. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You all are great, and I will continue to listen till you're not doing it
Well,
anymore.
we've got so many great guests lined up and a lot of topics, and I'm starting to get people to sign up for the contest, and they're giving us ideas of things that they want to hear on the show because that's one of the questions. So we've got a lot of great things coming down. So keep on listening.
That's exciting.
All right. If you want to share your crazy sugar dating stories, questions, or comments, go to our website at secretsofasugardaddy.com and follow us on Instagram. You can message me directly there. I get that so quickly, like bing, instantly. Right, Alejandra?
Oh, yes.
But anyway, again, thank you, Alejandra, for sitting. I know you didn't want to say much, but you're sure nice to look at, right? Right,
Oh my God.
Fanboy?
I could do this all day.
All right. Until next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to connect or even be on the show, we'd love to hear from you at secretsofasugardaddy.com.